I've been in graphic design for such a long time, but there's all of these other aspects of life that I feel like play a role in that, from psychology and mindfulness, but then other creative pursuits like music and photography and all of these different things that go into understanding how do people interact with stuff. It's everything is design. Everything. Everything in our home, somebody sat down and thought about and crafted it, and thought about all of these different aspects of it. And I just love that. I love the idea of design thinking just as much as the execution of it.
Hi, I'm Jason.
I'm Fran.
I'm Karli.
This is Bo Peter.
And I'm Nicole. And this is Marketing for What Matters, where we explore how marketing paired with a regenerative mindset can uplift humanity, heal the planet, and still achieve profitable business growth.
Hello and welcome to the Marketing for What Matters podcast. I'm Karli Petrovic, your host for today, and I'm joined by Gabe Gandzjuk, a fellow Peaceful Media team member and the design guru, so to speak, of the first ever Peaceful Media Zine. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you, Karli. Happy to be here.
So now I really wanted to start off this episode with a little fun fact, but for that to work, I need you to tell me how long you've worked for Peaceful Media.
Gosh, I think it's a little over 10 years now. So a solid decade of a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Right. So I have been working with the company for about 8 years. But when I first started, you and I were working on an account together that I still work on, but you don't.
Yes.
Called Hadoop Heating, right? So an HVAC maintenance company out of Gresham, Oregon. And I'm mentioning this in part because Hadoop Heating was actually a huge part of the inspiration for the zine, which I think we'll get into a little bit later. And they're featured kind of within the pages. But the fun fact is that although we've worked together on projects at least that long ago, I had no idea what you look like until maybe 3 years ago. When Peaceful started doing those lunch and learns and kind of making a bigger effort to connect the team. And I think that's just kind of funny to show, how little you can know about someone and then work with them.
I know it is strange. It's a weird sort of, thing of this kind of digital world that we work in, and kind of, how Peaceful Media is, where it's like you're working with so many people around the world. And I feel bad that we never really, we didn't have that connection. We should have hopped on calls a lot sooner. So I apologize.
No, yeah. I was also kind of thinking about that, when it's like, oh, can you work remotely and still get the job done? It's like, well, case in point, I guess, is that, so. Anyway, I just thought we should talk a little bit about that before we jump into the details of this project, which is we want to talk about the Peaceful Media Zine and how it came about. So I'd love to hear that from your perspective.
Yeah, this project came about a couple of years ago. Peaceful Media had a retreat in Hood River. And, talking about seeing people in person, that was one of the few times that I had seen a lot of the team. It had been a while for all of us to be together. And it was just such a great experience for us to share space and just have this wonderful time of communing and eating meals together. And so there was a lot of time of just sitting around the table and having great discussions. And so Jason and I, he had brought zine that AG1, the health and wellness brand, had produced, and he was just really impressed by it and excited about the possibilities of Peaceful Media doing something like that. The beautiful thing about the zine is it was very simple. It didn't promote their product in any way. It just it reinforced what their mission is and kind of the brand ethos of what health and wellness is all about. There were interviews with a lot of great thought leaders in the mindfulness space, and articles about nutrition. There were recipes in there, and just a variety of different perspectives, and all of the people that AG1 seemed to associate themselves with. It was kind of a collection of bringing that all together and having something that somebody could hold in their hands and share with other people. And so, Jason and I got to talking about, what would that look like for Peaceful Media? And that's how it started to kick off. and then we went our separate ways, and it was just an idea that the seed had been planted, and so once we got rolling with it, it just all came together really nicely.
Yeah, and I think that tangible aspect was what was so appealing. Talking about Hoodview Heating, they've been doing a printed newsletter forever, and people love it. It's like they can't wait to get it in the mail.
I love it too. I've been doing design for a couple of decades now, and I've done so much print work in the past, and it's been an interesting transition into mostly digital. But there is something that I miss about working on a printed piece that I know that somebody is gonna pick up and interact with and spend the time reading through it. Now a lot of people, they're spending so much time on social media, and they're getting a little something, and then they're moving on from somebody else, and they're getting just these little bite-sized bits of information in a lot of different perspectives. There's both a beautiful aspect of that, is you're being exposed to a lot of different ideas and a lot of things that you're interested in. But in terms of really kind of retaining what that information is about and sitting with it and giving it some time to really feel like, okay, what am I learning from this, or how is this affecting me, instead of just viewing something and quickly moving on from it. So that's what I love. I love that, Brian from Hoodview Rivers is still, producing that, because it's a way for him to stay connected to somebody, that is asking them to be considerate of their time and look through it. And I know that resonates with so many people, and that's why he's still doing it.
Yeah, and me personally, coming from a background of working on printed magazines, it's kind of just sad to be at the newsstand now and pick up a magazine. It's almost entirely ads, because it just has fallen so out of favor. But
I know it's tough. I have this, I guess you would call it a ritual, but every time I fly, I will intentionally buy a magazine or two to read on the airplane. And it's the only time that I buy magazines or do anything like that. But I've been doing it forever. It's just that one, time where I allow myself, okay, I'm gonna try to read this cover to cover, and really focus on the articles, and really, commit my time to absorbing that information like that, which is just it's just so foreign, because so much of we're spending our time in the digital space. But it's a ritual that I still do. I did it last week.
and now you have to buy them, because all the in-flight magazines are kind of gone. You couldn't
They are.
even do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's funny. And so based on kind of that AG1 zine, going back to that, so now you have Peaceful's attempt to create their own. How did you approach the design template based on, what Jason gave you to work with?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started with the rebrand that we had worked on. There was something when I got involved in Peaceful Media, helping out with their rebrand, which always, anytime I've worked with the companies and agencies rebrand or something, there's always a lot of people that need to be involved in it. So when I got involved, a designer had already kind of started, but then I came in with a fresh perspective, which is what the leadership team was. They wanted something else. They liked where it was going, but they needed something a little bit different. And so something that I started to explore with Peaceful Media's branding was, how do we show the work that we're doing, but also capture who are the people who are doing this work? What is it about them and about Peaceful Media that makes it unique? And a big part of what I've noticed with Peaceful Media over the 10 years that I've been working with them is the different types of people that tend to come on board and work for Peaceful. They don't fit in a box. They may have a title, but they do a lot of other things outside of that. And usually they may be called and hired to do one specific task, but then it really branches out. There's a lot of different directions that I've noticed. The people who work for Peaceful, they inevitably end up getting involved in. And so the question then became like, well, how do you show that visually? What does that look like? And something that I've become more conscious of too, as the design world has evolved, is to show something that it is more human. How do we convey a more human aspect to design? Because so much of how we're seeing design and how we're interacting with it, it's on the screen. There's a confinement to it. And so how do we break out of that? How do we create an emotional response that doesn't feel so isolated? And so part of that was I started to just explore these kind of abstract shapes, these shapes that look like they're moving, um, even if they are kind of standing still. And then what goes in those shapes? What is something that can be um, relatable and understood, even if it's in a framework that is kind of abstract or kind of makes the mind do a little bit more extra work, instead of just seeing something on a screen that's like, okay, here's a box and there's a picture in that box and here's another box and here's a, you know, that's appropriate for certain industries and applications. But in terms of conveying creative work, conveying information that is you're wanting a person to go a bit deeper, what does that look like? And so with the rebrand, I started to explore these different shapes, and then putting elements of nature in them, as well as other types of photography that I found inspirational, and also that they really spoke to, you know, part of the core values that then Peaceful Media started to go on a journey of defining, which they had never really done. So thinking about the zine, I was like, okay, what is it that I can bring in that still fits within the brand and doesn't feel like a big, leap from that. And so I started to explore those additional kind of shapes. What are these abstract elements that I can bring into this, but also what is a story that we can begin to tell.
And so how did that kind of come into it? Sounds, there's so much around the shape and the movement, but how did you kind of bring in color and other design elements to tell that story?
Yeah, since we had decided to have this be a seasonal thing and the themes be focused on the different seasons throughout the year, I wanted to bring in all of those elements, and kicking this off with the spring edition. Um, what are the colors that we're starting to see in our environment? I live in a coastal town in California. It's really beautiful, but there's a lot of evergreen here, so I'm not getting the four seasons. I've lived in other places where North Carolina, where I've had that experience of the four seasons. And it's just interesting to know and understand, living in both different places, what that'll do, what the expectation or what you're starting to look forward to as the colors are changing. And so for the spring edition, I wanted to bring in these different colors of nature that lighter pastels, or brighter kind of greens, that then speak to a lot of the copy that you started to work on about these ideas of renewal and these different practices and rituals around that.
Yeah, it was so interesting because we had the design template first, right? So I'm writing copy kind of around some of these things too. And we have an overarching theme that we're both kind of working toward. It's interesting to kind of bring those elements together, because then once the copy is written, the design changes a little bit again, to kind of accommodate those things as well. So the first iteration of the zine, and hopefully we can have Scotty kind of integrate the images of both, but the second feels similar to the first, but it's different too. So tell me how you got from phase 1 to phase 2 and where we ended up.
Yeah, with that first iteration, I had started to explore these kind of textured gradient shapes, with these floral kind of overlays of kind of like exposed photography. And as I started to explore colors, I wanted that to be the thing that was carried throughout the design. And so, one thing that I love about working design and working with teams is the collaboration aspect. So I may have a great idea that comes about, and then I put that together, and then I share that. But it's not, we need a feedback loop in life. And, that's one thing that is part of my design process, is that, okay, I have an assumption and I'm going to pursue that, but then what is the response from other people? That's almost just as important as ideas that I'm coming up with, is how is somebody going to see this and what are they going to feel? So I remember when I sent it to you, you had given me some, you started to collaborate about, okay, what about bringing in other photo elements? And then, once I started to do that with a lot of these shapes, it really brought more depth to it. So starting to add photography in a way that was very literal, but then include these different shapes that spoke more to the feeling, and then metaphorically, the message that we were trying to convey.
So then what personally were you hoping that readers would feel when they held this in their hands and experienced it?
Yeah, I don't recall how the title for the zine Pause came about, but I don't know if that was in a discussion that Jason and I were having. This is very likely. But that word really definitely resonated with me, and I feel like this it's just such a powerful kind of a call to action, and I know that I need that as well in my life, and especially nowadays where it's like there's so many. I feel like people are constantly doing things, and then when they're finished doing something, there's always something else to do, and so it becomes, we need reminders to like, okay, let's just pause for a second in between those things and all of this type of busy work. And I've found that the best way for me to do that is to go be involved in nature, do something where I'm feeling more connected to nature. And so with with the zine, the whole intention is for somebody to kind of step away from the screen or step away from these busy aspects of their life and really give themselves some time to sit with this printed piece and just pause from everything else, all of the circumstances that may be kind of feeling overwhelming.
Yeah.
Is to sit with this very simple 16-page booklet and give themselves that time. And so that's really the intention with each of these is that pause.
And then from there, it's like that's not the end of it, right? Because now this has to get printed. We have to think about paper and finishes and all of that. So this is mostly for my education too, but how do you determine, what it's supposed to feel like and, translate that to what we need to order when we print it?
Yeah, that's one thing I love about the printed pieces too, is that you can design something and visually how a person sees it. That's such a big aspect to it, but actually, like when they're holding it in their hand, that's part of the design experience too. That's such an important part as well of design, is what is that feeling, that tactile aspect to it. So with the printed piece, I'm always mindful of that. That's always an important, kind of end result almost, is, all right, how is this going to feel to a person when they're actually picking it up and interacting with it? And so with the zine, so much of this connection to nature, and I feel like where Peaceful Media has always been, but definitely now more so where they're going, is this commitment to, environmental education and sustainability. And I wanted this to feel like it was being respectful of that. So nothing that was too glossy or felt too flashy, something that's more softer to the touch, uncoated, recycled paper, so something that is just in alignment with what is being, what the content is sharing, but also what's visually being represented. Because it would feel strange if I'm picking something up and there's all of these beautiful imagery of nature, and then it's just a super high gloss. It's not appropriate, I feel. So
Yeah, and it's so interesting to think about like how much intention goes into good design, right? Like, you could create something, but like to really have it fire on all cylinders for everything to connect, it's like intention on every level.
yes. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting because as a designer, I've been in graphic design for such a long time, but there's all of these other aspects of life that I feel like play a role in that, from psychology and mindfulness, but then other creative pursuits like music and photography and all of these different things that go into understanding how do people interact with stuff. It's everything is design. Everything, everything in our home, somebody sat down and thought about and crafted it, and thought about all of these different aspects of it. And I just love that. I love the idea of design thinking, just as much as the execution of it.
Yeah, for sure. And then we take that intention into the copy as well, because we're talking about the growth of our clients, how they're inspiring rejuvenation and being intentional. And it's cool to see those things come together. And especially spring, I feel like was such a great place to start because
Yes,
like
absolutely.
that's an explosion of growth, like that's the theme, rebirth. But you have any thoughts about future zines, right? We'll be doing summer next. How does that play into the design and what we're thinking about?
Yeah, something very just bright and sunny and hot. And no, but my intention is to explore more of and the shapes may look different, capturing that feeling. I mean, it's really the intention with the zine is to have people I guess bring in some new insight or think about something in a different way. And so whether that's continuing these kind of abstract shapes and seeing something in a new light is definitely something that I want to explore. And then also, yeah, what are the colors that we're surrounding ourselves with in the summer months, and what does that feel like, and what does that how does that speak to the human psyche?
Yeah. And then how do you kind of carry the design through, so that like pause feels like a peaceful media zine again and again, even as the seasons change and the colors change and the, photography changes.
Yeah, what I love about this one is that we did bring in those elements of telling stories of our clients. There's definitely a lot of that, and even in the areas where, yeah, I'm not using all of these abstract shapes, and still there's just traditional kind of structure to it. We're still conveying, who our clients are and what makes them unique, and also lifting them up and showing the work that they're doing and how that inspires us too. So I think I love that's an aspect of it. Because then it goes into that idea. It's like it's not a self-promotion tool. It's really showing what collectively we're doing together. So
Yeah, I hear that. And that was kind of the thing about Hood View heating too. Like it ends up working as a marketing tool, right? Because people experience it, they learn about like what they need to do every season to keep their HVAC system running healthy, so like there
okay,
are aspects of it that are
right.
informative and helpful, but then there are things like, a recipe that has nothing to do with HVAC maintenance, right? It's like Ryan's list of things to do around town. Again, nothing having
Yeah.
to do with HVAC
Well,
maintenance.
which I love too, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's just such a great aspect of branding where it's like, okay, I really care about you, and like this is stuff that I think is cool. So go check this out. Go check out this event, and it's just a seasonal events. It's just it's such a it's just a great extension of, yeah, it's like you may call Brian up and you'll get that experience when he comes and helps you out. But then this is the extension of him helping you out in just other aspects of your life, which I think are fantastic.
Yeah, because, as we're talking about here, that's what we want people to experience from Peaceful Zine as well. We don't want them to pick up pause and be like, this isn't icky marketing, like very clearly promotional material. That would be completely against the whole idea of it. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's something to be said there for how do you do that, and it is in the design, it is in the copy, it's a full product of saying like this is how we care for our clients.
Yeah, and I think too, what you crafted for the pausing is that these are universal things that we're touching upon, aspects of mindfulness and things that can help a person process these aspects of life and go through these seasonal changes. And, and that's what I think really inspired Jason about the AG1 zine. And it was just like, okay, yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one, just because of how well this was laid out, and how engaging the content was, and how applicable it is to one's life. So
Yeah, and we'll see how that plays out with our clients because those who have responded with addresses are getting them pretty soon. So
I can't wait.
hopefully,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have some that feedback loop that you talked about earlier, so that can help inform us next time around as well. All right, Gabe, is there anything else you want to add or anything else that came to mind about the zine that you think we should tell people
I
before we
think,
wrap?
like I said, with pause being kind of a call to action, I think it's just, it's such an important thing these days is to just remind ourselves to, let's just pause for a second, pause from the scrolling, pause from letting in so much information. And of course, the best way to do that is to access nature in some way, whether that's a short walk or, some type of interaction where you're just letting yourself take a pause from life. It's very effective.
Yeah, and I think it's like what I like about it too is it's like the gentlest call to action, like the call to action to just be for a
Yes,
minute.
it's not stop. It's just pause. It's just it.
Yeah, right.
Breath
And then
of
you can
fresh
go
air.
back to doing all the millions of things that
All
you're
of
gonna
that stuff
do.
will be ready for you when you're done pausing. It'll still be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Gabe. This was a wonderful conversation. I hope everyone will be inspired to check out the zine, which will also be in our store so people can kind of print it on demand. And that was one of the other aspects of keeping it very green, right? We're not going to print
Absolutely.
a billion copies and,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
love that.
that's kind of a nice aspect too.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Until next time.
All right, Karli.
Thank you for tuning in to our podcast, Marketing for What Matters. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, or Pandora. Love the show? Leave us a review and follow us on social media at Peaceful Media to stay up to date about new episodes. And as always, thank you to this earth for giving us all we've ever needed. See you next time.